Thank you very much. So this is a Darwinian question. Where do we come from? And from whom did we come from? Genetic analysis. Tomorrow we'll have a talk on genetic analysis. For instance, they have followed the course of migrations. So all current humans descend from the groups of Homo sapiens that lived in Africa, south or east. We don't know yet, more than 100 to 300 years ago. That Homo neanderthalensis were not our ancestors, but a species that arose previously, interbred with us, and became extinct, maybe because of us. But we are not the descendants of chimpanzees, gorillas, or bonobos. They are our cousins, but we are indeed Africans, according to Huxley and Darwin's intuition, the first scientists to postulate such an origin. Paleoanthropology and evolutionary primatology really started with Darwin, with the help of Huxley, his disciple and spoken defender of his work, his bulldog, especially in the descent of man and selection in relation to sex. Relation to sex is much more important in the quantity of text in this book than the descent of man. The term primates, the first one created, comes from Linus. The term primatology is quite recent. It was used in Yale University in 1942, probably thanks to Roch. But non-human primates, although they did not exist endemically in Europe or in Egypt, had been known and in a certain way also studied since millennia. But we considered Edward Tyson to be the father of primatology. In 1699, he published a book comparing a chimpanzee called orangutan or pygmy to a papio, to a human, in order to establish the chimpanzees were, this is very important, anatomically more closer to humans than to other monkeys. Paleoanthropology is coined in French in 1869, before Darwin's book, which is 1871. And already in the time of the descent of man, some Homo neanderthalensis remains had been found. This is, as you can see, the geographical limits. Take a look, so low in Africa. There is a very small point here in Yemen of primates, but this was very, very low. And there is a very small spot of Macaca sylvanus, the northern macaque that came to Europe, which is this is very small place. It was introduced to Gibraltar. The Egyptians worshipped the Papio hamadryas as one of the two. You're going to see that Darwin also worshipped the Papio hamadryas as one of the two representations of the god Thoth. The other one was the ibis. They went far away to purchase them from people of Punt, but they also reproduced and mummified them. They also mummified African macaques from the Atlas Mountains I already showed to you. The Carthaginian Hannon traveled in the 15th century before Christ on the western coast of Africa, according to my research in today's Senegal and Gambia. He had chased some 8 men called gorillas. Gor means man in Wolof. According to the behavior, they were chimpanzees, not gorillas, which live only in the equatorial region of the continent. But the myth and the name of gorilla had started since then. Since he wrote his famous Peripple, Hannon, he captured, killed, and skinned 4 females. The skins were put out in a temple in Carthage, where they lasted centuries until the Romans destroyed the entire city in 146 before Christ. The Greeks also identifies other species of non-human primates. For instance, this was a description made by talking of what could be an orangutan. And if you can see, it has hair around the face, the belly of an anthropoid. The vulva is human because the vulva in women is more frontal than chimpanzees or orangutans. and the distance between thumb and the rest of fingers is enhanced. The woman is also brachycephalic, which is not possible with the monkeys. Gessner also produced this hairy woman. It has hair around the head. It has breasts, which are more human than anthropoid, because anthropoid do have breasts, but not as large as women. It has prehensible hands, as quadrumans, but it has a tail and callosities, which don't have the larger anthropoids, only only another species, and not the orangutans especially. The gibbons have callosities and a tail. But this was the first dissection, the first dissection of a red chimpanzee, actually an orangutan. It was dissected by Bond, a Dutch physician. It was said she was libidinous because they manipulated her lips to be similar to what they thought was a libidinous woman. So you can see here, she was already dead, so they put her lips forward. So, and it was considered to be libidinous.
That's like most women in Southern California.
Oh, really? Be careful, Daniele. We have very.
Well, because there is a huge plastic surgery.
Because of that.
It was not I'm sorry, it was not a racial consideration.
Okay.
Southern California is the #1 capital of plastic surgery, and lips are the #1.
But be careful. And then with Tyson, primatology started because he compared it was an actual chimpanzee, although he called it an orangutan or a pygmy, and he compared it to a papillon and also to a human. And he showed that he was similar, more similar to humans than the other monkeys. His skeleton has been kept in the Museum of Natural History of London, but his skin was lost. And a very funny thing, he's using a stick. They can walk long distances to feet without any use of a stick. This is the skeleton which is left in the museum in London. Before also, both in England, a chimpanzee, we call it the Joko. He died also very young. He was trained to serve tea to his guests. Buffon had it naturalized, and I think it is today the oldest naturalized animal in the world. It is in the zootech in the Museum of Natural History in Paris. And I think it is the oldest naturalized. It has survived all Napoleonic wars and First and Second World and everything. And then the gorilla in 1847 was discovered by Europeans. And Savage, who was a priest, a medicine, who had read the purple of Hannon, so he said it was a gorilla. So at the time of the origin of species, in 1859, 2 species of African apes were known. The bonobos were described only in 1930s. So only 2 species were known, the chimpanzee troglodytes and the gorilla. Human origin was Darwin's concern since the origin of species. He published it only 15 months after on the tendency of a species to form varieties. You remember he published with Wallace and others in 1868. And he published it because my friend Juan Manuel knows that very well because a text arrived and his friend helped him to publish very, very quickly. But at the end of the origin of species, he announces light would be thrown on the origin of man and his history. He did not want to go any further on that moment in 1871, in Descent of Man. He mentions there would be more public tolerance with dealing with our origins, which wasn't true in 1871. And within the existence of 2 anthropoid apes in Africa and only 1 in Asia is the main basis of his deduction of our expressed African origin. But then what about the other varieties of humans? Did he knew of any? Yes, the Neanderthal had been discovered, although not yet named as a species. They found a large calotte of the Neanderthal's man. Huxley and him mentions this and other discoveries, but they are very cautious on this matter. But there has been a prior discoveries of the well-known calotte Neanderthal remains. He couldn't know, but today there had been discovered around 23 species of hominina, walking on two legs primates, Australopithecus, Homo, and everything. All genera starting in Africa, in the east or the south, we don't know it yet, as I said, although some species, as Neanderthal, Denisovans, to mention only two, developed from Homo erectus in Asia. This is the famous, this is not the actual calotte, but this is a Neanderthal calotte. You can notice it is very long, larger at the back than at the front, and especially it has a large superciliary arcades. This arcades. It has a big, even bigger brain capacity than that of Homo sapiens, but its structure is different, elongated instead of globular. They share 99.8% of our genes, including those related to language. They were not as ancestors, as I said. In a popular view, even today, it was a brute. Funny thing, the man of Cro-Magnon, which was an Homo sapiens, not an Neanderthal, was also depicted as a brute when he was discovered. So we can see here a Neanderthal. It could be among us. Maybe I am a Neanderthal, and you wouldn't notice very, very easily. And before the discovery in Belgium, a jawbone from another Neanderthal, together with the remains of Homo sapiens, which is very interesting, were known to specialists and to Huxley in his book, The Man Place in Nature. You can see that the use of the place is a kind of a religious remain, because you don't speak in biology of the place of a species. So most of Darwin's reflections of humanity are based on Huxley's book. Eugene Dubois followed Ernest Haeckel, inspiration that humans may have originated in Asia, not in Africa, in his History of Creation by Haeckel. And Haeckel thought was a missing link that could be found in Asia. And indeed, Dubois discovered the Homo erectus, the first Homo erectus that was discovered. And he was thinking that the tailless gibbon, which is a lesser ape today, could mean that the possibility to have humans in Asia. But the gibbon, although it has not a tail, it has callosities on his buttocks, which allows him to sit on a tree for a very long time. So Darwin was in a better idea to have more similar to human anthropoids in Asia. After his death, Darwin's theory was almost forgotten until the new synthesis in the 1940s, which integrated Mendelian genetics and many more disciplines in the core of the idea of natural selection. As we all know, Gaillon published a book on this period. Something similar happened with paleoanthropology. After Dubois' discovery of Homo erectus and some more discoveries in Asia, together with the terrible scam of the Pilton man in England, which was a modern skull of a human attached to a modern orangutan mandible, a scam that had consequences during the decennia. Then African origin was forgotten. But then in 1942, Raymond Dart in South Africa described the tongue boy, the 2.5 years old Australopithecus africanus, which means the southern monkey, which had probably been captured and killed by an eagle. It was unearthed in a quarry in a similar situation as the Neanderthal, the calotte with the Neanderthal. More than half a century had passed to provide a solid scientific proof of her African origin. Deduction or intuition, or both, that Darwin, based on Harvey and Huxley, proposed in 1871. Paleoanthropology really started then, and the discipline has become, with primatology, one of great importance in biology and anthropology. Primatology is very interesting, has more female scientists than male scientists in the world, but in most places, those that decide on the money to give for research are males. So this is another subject discussion. This beautiful lady is the Homo floresiensis female, a very small Homo variety, species. And the concept human has now been greatly enlarged by paleoanthropological discoveries and recently by extraordinary reconstruction phases. Just imagine how wonderful this phases is. So Lucy is this one. This is another, this is Lucy. Of course, he didn't know George. He didn't know the color of the skin. So he made a possible comparison of the intensity of ultraviolets rays in many of these phases. And we now know that red hair comes from Neanderthal or a mixture with Neanderthal. So this is the problem that which I was wondering, and I think I have introduced myself in a problem, because as we can see, deduction is going to be very easy to establish, but intuition is a very difficult thing to say, but I have an idea. Well, deduction, there are many logicians here. In logic is a rigorous proof or derivation of one statement, the conclusion, from one or more statements, the premises. A chain of statements, each of which is either a premise or a consequence of a statement occurring earlier in the proof. Of course, if the premises are correct, necessarily the proof or the consequence is going to be correct. So some of Darwin's premises were all forms of life are related to the same ancestor, from whom they diversify by natural selection during a long time. The more varieties of a species that exist in a given place, the more probability there is that such a species originated in that location. There were two species of anthropoids, as already said, also known as spongids or great apes. Actually, there are 3 now, bonobos, in Africa, and only 1 in Asia, because the gibbon is a lesser ape. So this conclusion is that these premises are true, so man originated in Africa. But what about intuition? I think that we had also an intuition. Intuition is a very complicated thing. It is thought as an original independent source of knowledge since it is designed to account for just those kinds of knowledge that no other sources do not provide. I think there are many sources, and among many others, the genetic behavior, socially learned behavior, and behavior from personal experiences and interests that have had an impact on us, even if we are not always conscious of this fact. And I shall propose an idea of why Darwin was more interested in apes than in humans. The genetic behavior is, for instance, to freeze in front of a predator or an aggressor, even if that behavior is not the best reasonable response to the situation. I remember here in this campus, a case of a general aggression by violent students, brackets, we call paros. These people paid to be violent. And they attacked a group of students, and a girl froze. She couldn't move. So her boyfriend stayed with her, and he was severely beaten, the boyfriend. But he couldn't help her. She couldn't help it. She got frozen. Gorillas, especially males, cannot, for instance, withstand being looked in the eyes, even if they are born captive and are accustomed to humans. You cannot teach them to accept being gazed upon. This gorilla in Boval, you are going to see, take a very short look. He doesn't like it. He turns his eyes away, takes another look. I'm still staring at him with a camera. And after a moment, it's intolerable. And he goes away. So my focus will be, I'll go very, 10 minutes to finish, 40 minutes? Oh, okay, so Darwin had been have met the Fuegians. The Fuegians, 3 of them went to England. Actually, there were 4, but 1 died. And they had this human idea from Hume that they could be taught to be sensitive. So they were taught how to cultivate, and they were brought back to their origins. And what happened is they went back to their culture immediately. They were from 2 different cultures. There were 2 both cultures, and they belonged to 2 different cultures. These were the real names because they were baptized in a very, very aggressive way by the English. And then he mentions Brem's account of a chase of hamadryas, Papa hamadryas in Ethiopia, to kill and sell these animals. The same hamadryas, the same species that the Egyptians worship. I made a paper on that. What kind of dogs were chasing? They were run out, which are not very aggressive. They are very fast, so they catch an infant, and the infant was caught in a small promontory, and a very big male came down. He chased the dogs and took the infant, followed him, and saved him. So Darwin thought it was a heroic animal, which didn't happen with humans. He had a huge admiration. And in London Zoo, there was an orangutan female called Jenny that he went to see very, very often. The gorillas, they really put things on their head to protect them from insects. And this one has put a lettuce there. So I think in his intuition, when you are having in contact with anthropoids, are different with any other primate. It was my case. So I think his intuition was more linked to his admiration of primates than to humans. Thank you very much.